Hey, everybody, welcome back to The Collective. We have another fantastic show for you laid out today. Very excited. We got Dean returning, we got Tim returning. We are set up for a great conversation. Now, while I am excited, y'all should be too. Make sure you are liking the show, subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell, do all that good stuff. Get your emails whenever we drop these, which is, of course, on Fridays. And I am excited to get this started. So, let's get some intros and then we'll get into the conversation, the question I have, and we'll go from there. Dean, why don't we start with you? And 10 to 15 seconds, who are you, where you come from? Hit us up.
Yeah, Dean Stott, ex UK Special Forces in the SBS for 16 years, and now balance my life between still the private security sector, focusing on crisis management, specializing in evacuations from war-torn countries, and spending a bit of time on TV, writing books, and everything else, and being a family man.
I like it. So, not busy at all, just,
Not busy at all.
hanging out at home. I like it.
Yeah.
Tim, how about yourself?
Hello, my name is Tim Jensen. I'm Chief Brand Officer of Grunstyle. I also sit as the president of the Grunstyle Foundation, living in the great Republic of Texas, and good to be with you guys.
I like it. Awesome. We're excited to have you. Now, just the general question I had for you guys is on entitlement. And I wanted to talk about this today just as a thing kicked into my head. My wife and I were chatting about her work. She works at the University of Alberta up here, and there's this kind of prevalence within the student body to see education, higher education, as a public problem, right? So there's lots of things, poster boards and stuff like that around the campus that are saying, well, if you don't like how high tuition is, make sure you talk to the premier. Make sure you send your bill to your MP or whatever it is to discuss a personal funding issue as a public problem. And I saw that as an entitlement. So did my wife, but some others of her colleagues saw it as an actual public problem that, tuitions and things like that for schooling, for higher education, should be publicly funded. So I wanted to get your guys' just general thoughts on that right off the bat. Do you see that as an entitlement issue? Or do you see that as like a societal public issue? Tim, let's start with you. What do you think?
Well, I think it's a great question, right? What is the responsibility of government? We have this conversation here in the United States a lot, right? We're a constitutional republic. There's a certain amount of things that come along with that, and as we look at society and we look at the cost of things, the cost of education is becoming extraordinarily expensive. The average, I don't know what the average cost of a college education is these days. I know that my degree, I went for 3 years, got a bachelor's degree in game theory and design, and that was about $100,000, right? And if it wasn't for the VA and the commitments that I had through my military service, that would have been extraordinarily difficult for me to achieve, and the debt that I would have assumed would have been enormous. However, right, these are the things that if we were wanting to better ourselves and we're wanting to increase our opportunity and our marketability within the free market, right, we need to be competitive and we need to grow as an individual, become higher educated, so that we can expand our abilities. But again, like, entitlement is a tough question, right? We live in a world today where Marxism and all sorts of different types of beliefs are becoming very popular within the popular culture. And we see this a lot in the United States, and it is a tough situation, right? But I always revert back to what the Constitution says, right? We protect the rights of the minority. We provide ample opportunity for people to achieve life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. If we can achieve those three things, then we are living up to the standards of the founding documents of our country. Now, the opportunity of funding things that are offsets or subsidies, right? That's an opportunity for us to be talking in the open forum of our population and saying, hey, is this something that we want to be exploring as a country, and put it on the ballot, right? I see states across the United States right now that are offering free community college for individuals leaving college. I think that is something that is of great excitement, because we are encouraging our population to become smarter, right? But when we get into like the upper echelons of education of Harvard, Yale, and so MIT, right, where these educations are far beyond the reaches of the standard American, and you have to have come from an elite class. Well, that's a different conversation, and we have to work generally harder for those opportunities. But what is it that we want in our country, right? Do we want to continue to facilitate hard work and meritocracy, or do we want to give handouts to the population and make our civilization watered down and less competitive?
That's a very good question. Dean, what are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, obviously, I'm not educated. I never went to university, so I never had to pay back anything. And so, but for me, I agree with Tim. That it is the land of opportunity, and there are the minorities. But I think there needs to be a balance. I'll give you an example. In Scotland, your higher education university is free. It's free, and so people know that. And actually, if you came from Europe to Scotland, so for example, Estonia, and you came to Scotland, you resided there for a year, you got free education. If you came from England, you had to pay. It was totally offset. But then a lot of Europeans would come in, getting free education and going away. And it's like, well, why are we paying for these people, for their education? So I think there needs to be a balance or some comeback from them, is that you have to achieve, if you're going to go to university, you have to achieve certain grades, or you have to, see the course through. Otherwise you'll end up having to start pay it back. There has to be some sort of criteria rather than just a free handout. So it's almost like a written contract. But I do feel that not everyone has the luxury to be able to afford the education, because as you said, Tim, it's very expensive. I left school in '93. But I also, one of the things that I touched the nerve a little bit with me is that every job interview I see, or anything I see on LinkedIn now, you have to have a bachelor's degree. And I'm like, well, I've seen the quality that comes out of some of these universities. I've done a university life. And then, and so for me, it's like, I think it's a bit unfair that everyone feels that for them to succeed in life, they must have a degree as well. You know what I mean? There needs to be, look at it with the magnifying glass. But, I do think, to summarize, I do feel that not everyone has the luxury of being able to afford. So if it can be subsidized by the government, but I think there has to be criteria on that.
Absolutely. Shaun, where are you coming to on this one?
Well, I think that just to clean things up a little bit, Dean, you'd said that, you never went to school and you never paid for a higher education. But of course, I disagree, because you might be the most educated person on the panel right now based on your life trajectory. I mean, it's debatable who's got the most experience in life and who got the better education by not going to school. But I feel like we all did okay. Let's just leave it at that. We all did okay, given that I never went to university or college for a 4-year degree myself. And so turned out okay. I could have done better if I was a PhD, or could I have? And I don't think I could have, because some of the dumbest people I've ever met in the room are PhDs. I mean, they're smart. I mean, arguably maybe the smartest in the room, but a little bit disconnected from the reality of my world, the world that I operate in, which is not a theoretical model. And sometimes PhDs tend to operate in the theoretical rather than in the practical. I'm just basing that on the first time I ever bumped into a PhD, which was when I was a computer system engineer. And I've told this story before, and I'll make it super quick. But I stepped into an elevator as the doors opened. There was a guy standing in the elevator. I stepped into the elevator, stood next to him, and looked at him, and I knew him. He was one of my instructors in the computer system engineering school. And I looked at him and said, "Max, what are you doing?" And he just looked at me and said, "Shaun, if I don't press a button on the elevator, when the doors close, do I go anywhere?" And I just looked at him and I said, "Have a good morning, Max." Pushed the button, looked straight ahead, wait for the doors to open, and stepped out. Because, I mean, how do you have that conversation? I just don't have time in that elevator moment to do an elevator pitch to the dude who's standing in the elevator, think he's going somewhere. But he was a theoretical math PhD, and it was the first time I'd ever met someone quite like him, where he thought and existed in a world that I didn't understand. And it was only through getting to know Max that I realized that There's all kinds of people out there with all kinds of educations. And that doesn't mean, to Dean's point, that they're the right person for the right job simply based on a title that they earned in 2, 3, or 4 years. So now I finally get to my point. I think that there should be some form of opportunity for everyone. And that shouldn't be tied to economics. Now, I don't want to give handouts to every single person just because. I think it has to be earned. I think that if you're entitled to some sort of, we'll call it a freebie, there's got to be some payback. It's got to be a two-way highway. If I give, I get. If you get, you give. And so I'm not sure how it would play out, but in my little perfect world, if you need a higher education and you don't have the means to achieve it, then somehow you're going to earn it. It's either beforehand or after the fact, kind of like universal service. Certain countries, you serve your country. You spend 2 years, you spend 3 years, you spend 4 years, you pay back your education through serving your country, or etc. So I'm not good with handouts, just blank checks written out into the void with no accountability as to what that's providing for the general population, which is providing that means for someone. I'm okay with handouts that are tangibly creating something betterment in society. So to Tim's point, he'd said life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, I believe. None of that requires you to go to college, but going to college can create those things for you. More importantly, it can magnify it for the people around you. So I think it is part and parcel of the constitution of our modern society. I just don't think it should be handed out like free candy.
Absolutely. Tim, you got any additional thoughts on this?
No, I think these are all great points, right? And it's again the modeling of society, right? I don't think anybody wants to give handouts to anybody, right? I think we as humans want to give a hand up to people because we're at the core compassionate and empathetic people, and we want to do good in helping others. And I think that's ultimately, what you guys try to cover here on your show. And as as we say, every moment, do your best every day, right? And that's providing for others. So when you are in a position where you can help other people do great things, you are achieving the pinnacle of self.
Yeah, absolutely. Dean, any additional thoughts?
No, I did like Shaun's, maybe giving back in some form, back to the public, maybe conscription. Some countries you have to be conscripts, that's them giving back. Maybe if you do the conscription, then you're entitled to your higher education. Maybe something like that. Something that the public are generally going to see you giving back to them. But no, I think they're all good points.
Yeah.
I just got to jump in because Dean and I were talking before we went live. So Dean and I were chatting in the green room, and Dean was talking about how his visa status has recently changed. And I don't want to speak for Dean. Maybe Dean can fill in those gaps. But as we were talking in the green room, here's what I was thinking, buddy. To me, it sounded like Starship Troopers. If no one's ever read the book, it's actually one of my favorite books, definitely my top 5. And the reason I like that book is because it talks about serving your country, serving your fellow man, and how you became a citizen in Starship Troopers was you had to serve before you became a citizen. You weren't a citizen unless you earned your right to become a citizen. And in order to get that higher education, you had to earn your right to get into that higher education. And it required sacrifice. It required something bigger than just yourself. And I think that Starship Troopers is an excellent example of how society could run a little bit better. I'm not going to get all crazy and say that's the only way to do it. There's so many ways to skin a cat, of course. But as Dean was talking about your family's recent change in status, all I could think of was Starship Troopers because, dude, I mean, you're like almost a perfect representation of it. You came up through the trenches, you became large and in charge, you cracked it out of the park. You're an excellent representation of what it means to be almost like a superhero in serving your fellow man. And so it should lead to betterment. It should lead to a nod from some sort of an institution to say, thanks for your service and here's what you get. So Starship Troopers comes to mind. I just wanted to throw that out.
I like that. Starship Troopers is an interesting place to go with this. Dean, you got thoughts?
Yeah, no, just so obviously listeners like would be interested what visa is. Yeah, so yeah, me and the family have just been approved now for our green card, and I wish it was as easy as Shaun said. Recognize your time of your service, but actually none of that really came into play. The irony is recently got 220 Americans out of Israel. That didn't help. It was more the fact that you're an author. That's what they're looking for. You have Guinness World Records. It wasn't to do with anything I've actually done for society. I wish it was, Shaun, but it would have been a lot easier, the process. But no, it's a 3.5 year lengthy process and an expensive process. But for us, it's we're over the moon that we're now in America, and in that land of opportunity. Sort of going off piece a little bit. When we came here, I thought it was cliche, but now being in America, I do believe that is the case. If you're willing to work hard, then the world is your oyster, and that's what I love about being in America.
I like that. Now, Tim, you're born and bred down there, so have you noticed at all in terms of the American population? Has that desire almost to work hard and develop themselves for their own betterment, has that slowly slid away, or do you see that more often? Is it just like, what we see on social media that's being hyped up? What do you think?
Yeah, this is a great question, right? Because we can easily say, "Oh, yes, so the fabric of the United States is changing," yada yada yada. Because if we're watching the news, that's what they want us to believe. But when you turn that boob tube off and you are out in the world and you're interacting with people outside of your devices and you're just having real wholesome communication with your neighbor and people on the streets, at the grocery store, wherever it is that you're going, you will notice that we are far less divided as the media would like us to be, and we are still the greatest country on the planet, in my opinion. And that idea of meritocracy, that idea that if I am willing to go and do the hard work, that there's an opportunity in front of me, and I think I'm part of that story, right? I came into Grunt Style in 2012, right, as a T-shirt folder. I was making $10 an hour, and I was like the fifth employee in this business. But what I saw in front of me was an ample amount of opportunity, and I seized it for myself. I went after it. I was willing to put in the hard work and grind it out every day. So I went from being a T-shirt folder to being a production team leader, to being the production manager, to be the operations manager, to be the operations officer. I was made a partner in the business. Then I became an officer and an executive. Now I run the entire brand of this business, and I am now leading the foundation that's going out and doing great things within the veteran and first responder community. So this idea that America is changing, well, I think the idea is the same. I think the population is continuing to evolve, right? And there's a lot of things that are pushing those aspects of our culture, but the idea of America is still sound. There's levels of corruption that is permeating all throughout our country. That is, a whole nother conversation. But I think that the ability and the opportunity still exists, and it's for everybody. And you can go out and just grab it if you're so willing to do so.
Absolutely. Shaun, you got any thoughts on this at all?
I agree with Tim. I think that, but I might have misheard you. Did you say the greatest continent in the world? I think that's what I heard. I agree with Tim, man. I think that one of the beautiful parts about living on this continent is not always, but generally speaking, you get what you deserve to some degree. You work hard, you get. You don't work hard, you don't get. And I know those are almost sounding callous generalizations, but it gets gets across the point that sometimes is not said often enough. And I'm going to go back several generations, maybe to, kind of World War II as the example, where a continent bonded together or people bonded together to get things done, to work hard, to know that it was a righteous outcome that was occurring. And that's happened several times since, of course. I'm not turning a blind eye to modern times, but it just seems over the last couple of years, 2, 3, 4 years, perhaps, that the messaging behind you truly, not as a continent now, and not as a country now, but as an individual, you can be great. Just you and you alone can be great if you put in the effort to work as an individual, as part of a team, of course, but as an individual, it requires you to work hard to become great, to make the people around you great. And so it feels to me like the messaging has stayed at the macro level, rather than at the micro level, where you've almost got to point at someone individually and say, bro, did you know you could do so much more, or not be so much more, but you can achieve so much more if you do this and that and maybe the other thing. Maybe you recalibrate a touch, get some more sleep, hydrate more, etc. All of these tiny little things that seem inconsequential that make the individual great. And that's where I feel modern messaging should be focusing right now, is letting individuals know that they can be great.
I like that. Dean, you got any thoughts on this?
Yeah, no, again, something Shaun was saying then, it's the individuals. There's opportunities here if you're willing to work hard. And sort of going back to the original title of entitlement, in the UK, it's slightly different in the fact that there's a lot of people come over and they know that as soon as they got boots on ground, they're entitled to so many welfare services. And so that's the difference I see here in America. That isn't the case here. You have to still work hard. And so we've got that balance wrong over in the UK. But then on the flip side of that, you have a lot of people who are willing to work hard coming from Europe to UK. And so a lot of people from the UK born and bred, they're not employed. They can't be bothered to work because they have such great welfare packages as well. And they then feel entitled. So you then start having this whole circle. So I do think, this continent, you guys have got it right. Is that just because you are boots on the ground, it doesn't mean you're going to get this full welfare package. You still have to work hard. And that's where we're missing a trick back in mainland Europe or UK, because everyone knows, the attraction to UK isn't the land of opportunity. It's the land of freebies.
That's an interesting way to go with this. And, it actually brings up a thought from earlier when we were talking in the green room. On your trip to Israel, I said, it's interesting how you guys can see a hole and then fill a hole just right away. And I'm wondering about how often people are actually doing that, because there's lots of times, as we've said on the show, people have all kinds of great ideas. Everybody's got an idea, right? Oh, this would be great, and I could fill this, and I could do that. But the ability to fill the hole immediately is, I think, where the challenge lies. And I personally would like to get your guys' thoughts on this, just for my own, intel, my own knowledge. Was that a learned skill for each of you guys? Because all three of you guys represent this quite well, in that when you see a hole, when you see something that needs to be fixed, you're on it. Okay, now we're going to do this. So is that something you were taught, or do you think that was a personal trait that you had, bringing it and then harnessed it later on? Tim, we'll start with you. What do you think?
This is a fascinating question, because I'm a big student of industrial psychology and what makes people tick, right? There's several different psychological tests you can do that can give you a classification and characteristic of your own personal self, right? Myers-Briggs, go down the list. I fall into the classification of an architect, right? My personality is extreme. I'm a problem solver. I have a big presence, and I solve problems. So when I'm in a position of seeing something that, like, hey, I have the opportunity, I have the knowledge, and I have the resources, I'm going to fix this, right? And it causes a lot of problems in my home life, right? Where my wife's like, Tim, I don't need you to fix this. I just need you to listen. And so that's always a challenge. But I think that some people have this innate ability, right, to just stand up and go do it, right? And I've often found that these innate abilities are found in these places where it is selfless service, right? Where somebody is willing to stand up and say, hey, I'm going to raise my hand, and I'm going to go off into another country to do the work that is necessary, or I'm going to go into this community and be a fireman or a law enforcement officer to provide a service that's going to fill a gap of security or safety for a larger community. And those are very broad examples, right? And you could drill that down into to the average person, right? And saying, hey, like, I see somebody disrespecting someone else on the street, right? Am I going to get involved or am I not going to get involved, right? And often you'll see people just like in today's society, right? It's, ooh, look, I'm just going to put that on camera and share it out to the world, right? And and then you get others that are willing to get involved in these things, So I think it's something that is born into some, and others they can grow into it, and then they get to the point where they see so many problems that they're like, this is just overwhelming to me, and I have to make a difference. And they get involved at the local level, right? They start putting time at the YMCA, or they're going out picking up trash on the side of the road, or whatever it is that motivates people to get involved. I think it is that there's a moment that those people can go back in time and be like, hey, this was what it was, and here I am on my path today. And I see that a lot with our work that we do in the foundation, and really going after and solving problems there. I'll give you one quick example. There's a third of the military forces in the United States of America are on food stamps that have a family or like receiving BAH, and that is the stipend for family food allowance, yada yada yada. That blows my mind that there are individuals within the United States military that are on food stamps, and they're worried about putting food on the table when they should be worried about putting rounds on target. So we said, well, there's an opportunity. I have the resources and I have the means. And in 2023, we delivered over 100,000 pounds of food to active duty military forces, giving them $500 worth of food to offset their finances and put $500 back in their pocket. So I think that's just one example, and you can go down the list anywhere you are on this planet and find similar stories.
Absolutely. Dean, what are you thinking on this?
Yeah, so I think going back to your one, we spoke in the green room offline, again, some more context for the listeners. So the October 7th, when it kicked off in Israel, I was actually in Disneyland with my wife. First time I've ever been Disneyland, enjoying it. And then October the 8th, in the morning, I got a message from a friend whose family were on a tour in Bethlehem as it was all unfolding on the screen. By that evening, I was on a plane to Israel. But the reason we were, and I mentioned to yourself, Chance, it took then about a week to 10 days before the other team started mobilizing and getting out. And actually, the majority of the work was done by then. So the success of that was the fact that we were quite nimble. We had the opportunity. It was me and my wife. We had the knowledge. We evacuated people from Libya, Afghanistan, and other places. And we had the capacity, And so, I do see, me and my wife did a great guest speaking event in December. And the topic was who to help today. And what we were talking about is actually that it doesn't have to be on the world stage where you normally see the stuff that I do. There's people to help, as Tim's touched on, underneath your noses. But the majority of society, not majority of society, that's the wrong thing to say. There's two types of people. There's those who will just wait till someone else does it, or there'll be someone who does it themselves. Mm-hmm. And I think that, I don't think that is nurture. I think it is nature. I see kids who are genuinely caring and kind, and I see other kids who just walk straight on by. There's one thing that I don't know, you guys did it in the military. We did it in the militaries. Don't find a job. Don't leave any jobs unattended. If you see something, do it, fix it before the corporals or the sergeants, start shouting at you. So we're naturally in the military looking for jobs or things that need to be done or plug in holes, but obviously to different extremes. But yeah, I think Tim's hit the nail on the head with that. If you have the opportunity, you have the capacity, and you have the knowledge, then do it. Don't just walk on by and expect someone else to do it. And that's the luxury me and my wife had with October the 7th. We had the capacity, we had the knowledge, and strangely enough, unlike Libya or Afghanistan, I was telling you, Chance, I'd never been to Israel before. So all the other places I'd been to, I had safe houses, I had security, I had infrastructure in place. I'd never never been to Israel before. So I literally did it reverse. I had the experience of it, and I just had to do the reverse. And yeah, I mean, a week later, we had 220 Americans repatriated. So yeah, if we'd waited any longer, then and I said no one came in for about another 7 to 10 days. So if I had that mindset, well, someone else will do it, then that wouldn't have been a success.
Absolutely. Shaun, where are you coming from on this?
I think that we're kind of for me anyway, I'm in the right area on this subject when Tim raised up not the fact, but the idea that everyone has a certain personality. And I forget what the Myers-Briggs, the 4 letters that I'm assigned, whatever, but apparently it's the general. I don't know what that means. It's some sort of general type. But I don't feel like a general. At least certainly I don't get paid the same as a general. But what I do know is this, that I'm going to tie 2 things together. Your personality is maybe what you are, but then you got to figure out how to work that personality out into the world. And so Tim had raised the idea of, volunteer at the YMCA and etc. Well, I did do that. I did volunteer at the YMCA. And here's what I learned is that the YMCA wasn't the right place for me because I was already racing at an international level on mountain bikes. I thought maybe I'd be able to go to my YMCA and help people like, dude, your spin bike, your saddle, you need to raise it up another 12 inches. I mean, just try that for your knees for a little while, see how that feels. And so I just thought I'd be able to go help people, more safely participate in sports or pursue excellence in a more achievable manner than just going to the YMCA and hoping that it all magically worked out. But this is what my YMCA turned into. I had an idea that I'd volunteer my time to make people better. I found myself mostly folding towels. And so there's a lot of towels that need to be folded in the YMCA when the YMCA provides a free towel service. So I'd have all the people coming up to me. Can I get another towel? You sure can. I'd like 2 towels. I'm a sweater. Okay, I'll get you 2 towels. So I did that for about 3 months. I handed out towels. Just wasn't for me. I'm just not the towel guy, I guess. And so I found that my time wasn't valued there by myself or anyone else around me. And so you can be of a certain type of person. You can want to do good things in the world, but you can be underemployed in the area that you're trying to provide in, such as serving your fellow man. So I think you got to know who you are. You've got to look around for opportunities to help, to fill in the gap so that the corporals don't yell at you. And then you got to go do your thing and see if it's right for you. And maybe sweeping the hallways at the end of the day, every day, feels good to you. Keep on keeping on. But if it doesn't feel good to you, find another gap to fill in. The only way that you'll find your gap, like Dean punching straight over to Israel, Dean knows his gap because Dean's been in the game of filling gaps for a long time. He knows what works for him. But that was through a process, not a formal education, as we've already established. That was through 16 years of experience filling gaps and figuring out how Dean best works in these kind of situations. So Dean came to his fast conclusions through a long process of life. Whereas if you think that you can take a personality test, come up with who you are, and then instantly assign that's my path to success, or that's going to make me feel like I'm 100%, or that's the only thing I should do, you're probably wrong. You've probably got a couple of years of volunteering and filling in gaps or folding towels or scrubbing showers or mopping hallways, whatever the case is, until you figure out what works best for you.
I really like this point because when you first start working at a ranch or you first start working around horses or animals in general, what do you think the first thing you have to do is? You got to go shovel some stuff, and you're going to be doing it for a long period of time before you move anywhere else. And it's really more of a test to it's a job that needs to be done, obviously, right? It's something that has to be completed. But it's also something that, anchors you to the root of why you're there, at least in my mind. So like when I work with horses, I remember what it's like. And I still do have to, I can go and I clean the stalls afterwards and I brush the animal down and I do all the things that need to be done. But there's no complaint there. But when I first started, when I was a kid and I had to go do that, oh man, there was lots of complaint and lots of whining and lots of, well, I don't want to. I want to go riding and I want to, but it's part of the job. And I don't think we realize that until we do it long enough to realize that uh, it's integral to do those kind of, I don't want to say crummy jobs, but the less glamorous parts of the job to really understand how best to fill another hole later on. Because if you've never been out there cleaning stalls, you don't know what the job actually entails. At least in my mind. Have you guys noticed that at all in terms of maybe employing other people or just dealing with the general public, that they don't really understand the whole job?
Yeah,
Does that make sense?
I think I'd love to jump in on this because there was something Tim mentioned earlier. My ears pricked up that, he started folding t-shirts. So he started at the bottom. So he's that guy at the ranch shoveling wherever it is. But and I've seen this with a few big companies in America, the success is anyone who comes in, they're employed, they start on the factory floor. And the only way they can progress to being a director or executive director is through ranks. And I think that's great because you understand how hard it is. So when you're telling that person, you've been there. If you've just come in at a director level, you can't appreciate the hard work and effort that goes in on the factory floor because you've not been there. And so I've seen this before. At First Form, I go over to there, St. Louis, and that's the same. If I was to go get employed by First Form now, although I know Andy and Emily, I'm not going in at a director level. They're putting me in the factory and I'm packing and writing those personal cards. So I think it is crucial. I think for the development. And as you then develop and grow within that company or working at the ranch, you can appreciate the effort and time and how hard it is as well. Because it is hard work. It's hard at all levels. So I think it's very important as well for that. So I know Chance, you had to shovel, whatever you had to shovel, but you now appreciate it when the young boy and girl come in and they do the same, that, it does get better.
Absolutely, it does. Tim, you got any thoughts on this?
Yeah, I mean, it's a process, right? If you jump into something that you don't know, are you providing the value that you think that you are? Probably not, right? I think back to the fall of Afghanistan. I was a Marine. I fought in Iraq. I never fought in Afghanistan. I wasn't a tier operator. But when the fall had happened, I wanted to do something. I knew that I had the capacity. I knew that I had the resources. But you know what I didn't have? I didn't have the knowledge, right? I didn't know how to do any of that. But what was the next best thing that I could do? Well, I can look at different groups that are going in there. Let's Save Our Allies, Operation Geronimo, all these special forces guys that were coming together to go get their friends and allies that they had worked with for so very long out of that country. So I provided the next best thing for them, and that was finding ways of funding their opportunity to get them on the ground to do the work that they needed to be doing. That was that was the contribution that I knew that I could provide. I followed that process because I knew that if I was to insert myself and get on the ground and be some sort of force multiplier within that group, I would not have been able to provide the needed, necessary, required thing for that particular moment in time that somebody else could do better than me. So why even introduce myself to that and be a part of potentially a failing cog in that wheel? It doesn't make sense. And that's in everything in life, right? It is a process to everything. If you are willing to put your energy and time into something, go through the processes of it. If you are the type of individual that you're going to shortchange yourself or do shortcuts, then expect the result that you're going to get, right? Because that result is 9 times out of 10 going to be a failing result. And that's the way that we have to look at these things in life, right? You can't shortchange. You can't do the things that you want to do in an expeditious manner by cutting particular parts of the process out because those processes are all required for the end result.
Yeah, absolutely. Shaun, what are you thinking on this?
think that it's great that you made that conclusion, or you came to that decision, Tim, in respect to how best to serve in that moment, or how best to support in that moment, because we're all supporters and we're all servers, simultaneously, I believe. And whether a person's providing the beans and bullets, or whether someone's eating the beans and shooting the bullets, to me, it's of no concern. It's about the totality of the effort and all the players that are involved in the machinery making it move. And so I'd go one step further and say, arguably, Tim, that if you had let's pretend that you were the highest tier in the entire world, whatever that is, and you show up and you're the man. Well, maybe you being the man on the ground is going to move the needle far less than Tim, who's demonstrating support. Because I know for myself on the ground, if I feel like I don't have the support, I'll still get the job done. But when I feel like someone's got my back, or someone's giving me the nod, or someone's into what we're doing, or someone feels it's important enough beyond just like a very thin veneer of people who are in the know, like that moves the needle far more than a single man on the ground, I feel at times, knowing that the support is there. So perhaps, Tim, your support was moved the needle more so than any one man on the ground. I'm just throwing that out there. Second thought is this, that I find it ironic, perhaps, that if you can't work in a horse stall and shovel it and clean it up with no eyes on you and not do a good job, then here's what you absolutely can't do. This is guaranteed $1 million on the table. If you can't do that starting point of working in the dark, shoveling with no eyes on, you definitely can't go into the stalls of Tier 1 Special Operations in Canada. We actually are in horse stalls. Now, the facility that we're in is a facility that used to be used for the RCMP musical parade, the ride. Horses were kept in literal horse stalls. So my stall was a horse stall with all my gear, all my swag, all hanging up, all the sexy boy stuff in a freaking horse stall. All the horse stalls in a row, all Tier 1 special operators in horse stalls. How fascinating that day one, if you refuse to shovel out the stalls, you'll never make it into day 1 million living out of a stall as the thing that you want to be, but you'll never be it because you don't want to start at day one with the shovel. That's how life goes, man. You can't be the end result if you can't start on the day one process. And so the horse stalls of life are mandatory. You got to learn how to pick it up. You got to learn how to shovel it. You got to learn how to clean it up. And you got to walk out of there with a job 100% done with nobody watching you. And you got to be prepared to do it again the next day and the day after that. And week by week, year by year, eventually, maybe you'll be looking at Nomex hanging in a horse stall in Canada in an undisclosed location. And you'll be freaking proud of the process.
That's a great point.
Just one on that. You also need to be humble because it can happen anytime. It's something you mentioned there. So when I did selection, I went from tier 2 to tier 1. I was already an instructor in tier 2. I was at Livingston on the commando course. I was a sergeant. They take your rank straight from you. When you pass selection, you are now a trooper again. And so it can happen at any time. And for me, I was like, perfect. No, less responsibility and just load of door kicking. But, it's something you just mentioned there. Is the process, as you mentioned, Tim, the military is perfect example of the process. You cannot come in at sergeant level. You cannot come in at color sergeant, staff sergeant. You have to start as that private, that Marine, that trooper. The officers sometimes sneak in up there, but then they have their own process anyway. But there's a good example.
This is an interesting thought pattern then, because we see this a lot in the corporate world where you have C-suite individuals jumping from position to position to position without coming up from the ground, without joining that business from the ground level. And that, in my mind, that creates a level of disconnection, which again we see within the officer and enlisted ranks sometimes as well, right? Where there's just the disconnect because they don't really know what it's like to be on the ground. And I'm wondering if you guys, do you have a solve for this in terms of, the movement of personnel left, right, and center without
Yes, Tim.
people?
Tim's the solve.
Tim's the
Tim
solve.
did it. That's the process right there, Tim.
I don't know, Tim. Have you ever been referred to as the solution?
No, I've been referred to as many things, but the solution is not one of them. But I appreciate it. I appreciate it, Shaun. I think that's a great question. Like, if you're jumping into a situation that, like, let's take for example in my business, we make T-shirts, right? We're not making digital equipment. We're not making missiles. We're not part of the war machine, right? But we make T-shirts, and it's an application, right? You got ink that goes on a shirt, right? It seems simple enough, right? But if you're going to jump into something and be a screen printer, you don't know how to do screen printing applications. All you're going to be doing is creating chaos inside of a system, right? And then what happens then? The system starts to break, right? So you have not contributed anything other than failure to a total organization that is relying on you for you to come in and do something as a professional. And so I think when you're thinking about, like, how can I solve for certain situations? Well, you got to have a plan, right? And inside that plan, you got to have in the United States military, we have this thing called the PACE acronym. It's the Primary, Alternate, Contingency, and Emergency Plan, right? And you might go through all four of those steps before you solve your problem. And you're in the place of something that you're like, okay, we're here. I feel comfortable. Let's continue moving forward. But and then there's those things that you just cannot plan for, right? And what is the first thing that we learn in combat? Any plan that you have made, it goes to crap when the first round is fired, and you have to improvise, right? So there is a level of improvisation that has to go along with anything that you're doing, and especially when you're solving problems, because you're working in a kinetic and a constantly moving situation. As they would say, fluid, right? So be like water. And you just got to kind of move through these things using what you know and your experience, that you can solve the problems that are in front of you, right? And the two things I always ask myself when I'm in a situation that I may not know the solution to, or I'm in a situation of high stress, is, am I being shot at, and am I going to die? And if I can say no to those two things, then I will be able to solve any problem that is in front of me, because I'm a man of resources. I'm going to find somebody that can do it better than me. And I don't always have to be the problem solver. I just have to be the person that comes up with an idea that says, hey, I think we can solve this, and I'm going to go bring a team of individuals to this problem, and we're going to attack it full force.
Absolutely. I love that. Dean, thoughts on this?
Yeah, just something. Where we on that? I think you can't be experienced without experiences as well. People. When we're talking about people coming from C-suites to C-suites, they're probably in there for a reason. There may be a gap or a problem within that business, and this person has dealt with that problem in another company. Yes, they probably haven't started off on the shop floor, but what they have done is dealt with that situation itself. There's a company up here, I was in with them the other day, and they've now had a new CEO come in. He's come in from another company. It's another clothing brand company, but totally the opposite from them. It's not tactical. It was actually a kids clothing brand, but they've decided that this guy will know how to put more boots on the shop floor. And so, as Tim said there, you may not be the problem solver yourself. What's one thing me and Alana like to class ourselves as problem solvers. We may come into an industry we don't understand, but actually through our experiences in other industries, there are similar synergies. And that's the one I started thinking about the university thing as well, is that problem solvers, you cannot be experienced without experiences. But when you go to university, it's what's in black and white. And that's why I sometimes worry about the future of those that come out of university. You are educated, but your education doesn't start until you're actually, you are working.
Absolutely. Shaun, what do you think?
Well, I don't want to forget what Dean just said, and I do agree with, you can be a super capable PhD, or you can be the dumbest person in the room. It all depends on how you were brought up in the educational system. If you weren't taught to critically think throughout that entire process, well, guess what? And so to something that Tim had said, and he didn't categorize it specifically as saying that we are absolutely not in the war machine industry. He didn't say that. It was the spirit of things that caught my eye, because I kind of think that you are, because what you're doing is you're, as I see it anyway, based on the things that you've said just now, and observing the business, you're kind of applying the war game within your industry. I mean, you're talking about fluidized, tactical, strategic. You're talking about whatever. Maybe we're going to be talking ambush and counter ambush here in 10 minutes, but it's related to industry. And so there's that. There's the application of the war industry game that you learned well, and you've probably got some friends alongside of you who learned it well, and now you're flourishing because of those skill sets. But the messaging on that t-shirt, the messaging on any t-shirt that you put out, anything that comes from the company is part of the war machine industry if you choose to make it part of the war machine industry by your specific messaging. So you can move, you could be more powerful than a cruise missile depending on what you put on a t-shirt and who you sell it to, based on the spirit of the messaging. And so I think that a t-shirt company, and I was going to casually state just a t-shirt company to make my point, but some people won't recognize the delta of what I'm trying to explain, is a t-shirt company will have more impact sometimes with the right person, sometimes to change their life. Like there might be t-shirts that you've put out, buddy, that a person had to work real hard, had to save a long time to buy, and now it's their favorite freaking t-shirt. They wear it freaking everywhere because it represents them, not you, not the machine, but their spirit. It represents how they feel about themselves, how they feel about the world. And so you can go and serve your country and you might not get that feeling, but you can put on a t-shirt and you can get that feeling. It's like a poor man's poster to himself. And so I think that I know you don't undervalue what just a t-shirt company can do within the machine, but I feel that with the right people and the right messaging at the right time for the right individuals who pick up what you're putting down, it's a pretty powerful thing.
And just to add to Shaun as well, you're also supporting the war machine veterans with your foundation. That's probably more powerful than in itself. So yeah, kudos.
Absolutely. Jim, you got thoughts on this?
First, I appreciate the kind words from both of you fine gentlemen, and you're right. Think about like business in general, right? For us and individuals of where we come from and the cut of cloth of which we came, we're taking the ideas and the tactics, the strategies, the TTPs that we've learned over decades of honing our craft, right? And then we put the rifle down, and but we don't leave that lifestyle behind us, right? We're just applying it in different directions and into different mediums. Business is much like the battlefield, right? You're having to constantly maneuver through the space. You're constantly having to do site recons. You're having to SWAT, do SWAT reports on the enemy, or salute reports as you would, and understanding what is the opportunity, what does the consumer look like, what are the threats, right? These are all things that you would do on stand of battle preparation. And as an old sergeant in the Marine Corps, right, those things didn't fall on deaf ears or lightly on me. I love that aspect of my life, and to be able to apply it into a business and do it in a way that it makes sense, and then communicating it with a bunch of my friends who are all military people. It's like, oh, we all get this, and we all understand the mission, right? For example, inside of our business, like we don't do anything without doing a 5-paragraph order. What is the situation? What's the mission? What's the execution? What's the command and control? And what is signals? How do we move, right? And that is how we apply strategies within our business, and it works. it works so good that we were able to build this incredibly large machine in a way because the mission is clear for everybody. Everybody knows they're part of the execution because it's clearly defined in the command and control element. And we know how to communicate it to each other when we have significant events of critical information that needs to be passed up to command so we can make critical those decision points to keep the machine moving forward. So we do not stop, because what happens when you stop in combat? You die. And what happens when you stop in business? You die. And it's the same principles. There's just, the death is metaphysical or theoretical in a sense, in what would be considered on the battlefield. So, I'm extraordinarily blessed to have the opportunities to continue to apply those ideas that I learned so very long ago. And providing opportunities for people to really understand the culture of where we're coming from. And I think that is one of our bigger responsibilities as our company, right? It's grunt style. We are providing style through the lens of the grunt, right? And we are providing that look behind the curtain of saying, man, this is what the military lifestyle is all about, and this camaraderie, this sense of pride in self, and military and country, all the things that that all of us share on this call, right? These are the things that made us the men and the women of who we are today, and I think that's something to be celebrated, and that's one of the biggest things I love about being a businessman, one in general, but being a businessman within the four walls of grunt style, because it's a playground, and it's like the last 11 years of my career has been like a deployment. At least just get to go home every day and spend time with my family rather than trying to get them on a sat phone and listen to that 8-second delay furiously.
That delay was one of the crucial points. So much fun. This is a little side story on that one, but I was talking to my mom in Afghanistan on a sat phone, and we got rocketed. So all she heard was the explosion, and I said, "Gotta go!" Click, and then I didn't talk to her for like 3 days. She freaked out for a little while, but it was those are great points, and I want to bring this up because I want to bring up the concept of the idea and how powerful that can be, but not just the idea, but the application of an idea. And I think that's a lot of what I see within grunt style, especially, is that you talked about pride, you talked about camaraderie. These are just ideas, but when you apply them to each other, you apply them to what it is you want to do in life, it creates solutions. It exposes problems. It allows you to actually see what needs to be done and then do it. But it's not easy to apply an idea because it's fluid, right? Our idea of pride is different than your idea of pride, and what somebody else sees as camaraderie, we see as hazing, and like there's this constant kind of back and forth. And I want to get your guys' thoughts on applying those ideas to not just a demographic, but to the world. Like grunt style it is idealized for the grunt, but lots of non-grunts wear the stuff. Lots of people who were never in the military wear the stuff too. So it's kind of I'm just trying to grasp the whole concept itself. Tim, I'm going to come back to you on this one. What do you think?
Yeah, that's a great question, right? Because we ask ourselves this one a lot inside of our business. Is like, how do we continue to get further into the population inside the United States of America? As our core demographic started off as that 35-year-old sergeant, one deployment under his belt, probably a squad leader, and it's been one enlistment, right? That was the core demographic, right? Now where we are today, we're like 7 rings outside of that bullseye. And how did we get there was constantly asking ourselves, like, how do we penetrate further? How are we going to get grunt style to be a household name, right? And it's identifying the things that the common thread that goes through our population, and that there's this idea of patriotism. Right. And, this is where, it gets into some of the bigger conversations that we like having within our business. And it really centers around this idea of being apolitical. And this is, this can be controversial, but, at the end of the day, if there's no controversy, then is it worth having that conversation? So, for us, we believe that patriotism is a constant, and you don't have to be left, right, or center. right? It is, everybody to a reasonable degree has a love for this country. Now, the perspective that they have, and I'm speaking in the generalities of the United States, but when we talk about that, like you might have people on the far right that has this belief, and you might have people on the far left that have this belief. But you know what they're doing is they're participating in this opportunity that the founding documents of our country have allowed, is the opportunity to petition your government, right? And something that I'm very proud of, with the work that we've done over the years, is the passage of the PACT Act. I was a key stakeholder in getting the largest piece of veteran legislation passed in the last 100 years when it came to this idea of toxic bird pits, and how we were all exposed to this when in our service in Iraq and Afghanistan and 24 other countries around the world where special operators are working. That came down to simply when we were in Washington, D.C., and we were assured that the vote was going to pass. And then in the 11th hour, 14 Republicans changed their vote. Well, we aligned with all of our friends. We went to the Capitol, and we started knocking on the doors of those 14 people. I specifically went to the senator of the state of Texas, and that was Ted Cruz, and I was kindly escorted out of the Capitol by Capitol Police, surrounded by women and children, widows and orphans of men that have died or women that have died due to these toxic exposures. But we sat there and we said, you know what? And all the other conversations weren't going well, and it didn't look like this thing was going to pass. And we had just spent, some of us 15 years working this. I was in that conversation for about 6 years, and everything was becoming so focused that we were going to lose all of that work. And I said to my friends, I'm like, you know what, guys, we're not going anywhere. We're going to sit on the Capitol steps, and we're going to fight, and we're going to petition our government. Why? Because we love our country. We love everything about it, and we're going to take that point that we talked about earlier. We're going to take that hard right to correct a wrong. And by doing in 6 days later, sitting through the sweltering heat of August, Washington D.C., day and night, getting rained on, lightning bolts hitting within feet of us, unbelievable timing. But 6 days later, we got that passed, and we passed the biggest law in veterans history. But that's where I think, like, our company shows through in showing and being that example for people of, like, yeah, this is what patriotism is. We all have a love of country. We don't have to agree on everything. I mean, for Christ's sake, David Hogg was up there on the steps with us. I don't agree with his 2A. I don't agree with his position on the Second Amendment. But you know what? He was there to help us, and he was there to lend his voice on what we needed to do to get this bill passed, so that no more lives were going to be in jeopardy, and veterans would be able to earn their health care through the VA. And that's where I think we as people, have this opportunity to come together, right? As long as we got to get past this idea that, because you're on the different side of politics than me, I don't want to work with you. Well, that's not how civilization works. That's not how governments work, and that's not how populations work. I think that we can all align on the things that are important to us, and we can look past some of the disagreements that we may have in things and beliefs that we may have for the betterment of the end result. And that's where I think Grunt Style shines. We're apolitical. We'll talk to anybody that is willing to listen, that is willing to take an idea and bring it across the finish line. We're currently working on psychedelics here in the United States to get psychedelics decriminalized and descheduled, so veterans and people with mental health problems and conditions have access to these types of modalities of treatment. Now, I think we can all get behind that, because mental health is affecting nearly every person in this country, and I'll work with anybody to get that idea passed.
Absolutely. And I, just as a side point, I watched your chat with Chad McLean, who's awesome dude. Love that guy. He's been on the show a number of times. Dean, you got any thoughts on this?
No, I think Tim hit the nail on the head there. I don't want to go into politics or patriotism. I've gone from Britain, so I just, it's easy. But actually, when you were talking about how to reach out to a bigger community, I know, And I've done it before when I've chatted on the stage. I talked about my parachuting injury and then having an identity crisis and from the military, and what is my role in society, and the similarities between special forces and professional sports people. They spent their careers, build themselves up to be the best they could be, and then a life-changing injury or a freak accident sort of ends that. But actually, having now a bit more experience and knowledge, this isn't just special forces. This isn't just professional sports people. This is the whole community. Everyone likes to be part of a tribe and feel like part of a community. It's a great book called Tribe. And actually, it's mainly the males as well. Females are quite, they don't need to be part of a tribe. But as males, we need to feel like we're part of a community, part of a tribe. And so things like, your t-shirts, the grunt style, people like that. They like to see other people wearing it, and they give themselves a nod. So actually it's easier. Imagine from your initial concept to, right, we want to target the military community. How do we expand that? I imagine it wasn't that hard really, regardless of your political views. But yeah, I think the male community, that people like to feel part of a team, part of a tribe. And so, organizations like yours are perfect for that.
Absolutely. Shaun, what are you thinking?
Since we're on a t-shirt theme, I do like the idea of how it can draw people together 100%. It does create a nice sense of tribalism, and it can be a positive tribalism or it can be a negative tribalism. The first podcast of this year for the Gold Mine podcast, that's the first time we ever ran it. It was with two guys from Fuel Hunt. And they're putting out some stuff, and I love their slogans. I love their approach to life. They're out there kicking arse and all of that good stuff. And so they're just two cool guys who we had a cool conversation with. And I like the way they're running their program. They're into their tribe. They're into trying to make things better. They've got some messaging that I appreciate. And so that's enough for me. If you're a positive-minded individual, then we're going to be cool. And so what's the harm in any tribalism or any t-shirt companies? None that I see. And these kind of things, whether it's Fuel Hunt or it's Grunt Style or any company that's trying to create more cohesiveness within either the veteran community or in the community as a whole, positive, forward-thinking people. I'm a big fan, but it's got to start from somewhere. It's got to start from one person as the example. The person who gets it in their head and says, I'm going to start something called Grunt Style. And so to me, that requires not a special individual, but it requires a certain kind of individual. Because what will never happen is, and I'm going to use an unpolished term, if a normal person wakes up in the morning and says, I'm going to start something called Grunt Style, guaranteed by the end of the day, it hasn't started. And if it does start, okay, maybe there's a 3% chance that it starts. A week later, it's done, finished, because it's hard. There's a certain amount of grind to get anything off the ground from zero. And so 3 miles an hour, 10 miles an hour, doesn't matter what the velocity is, it's grind, all the time to get something going. And so why will a person stay in the grind game? It typically takes a really strong why. And funnily enough, just this week, we were in a podcast, and it was with two individuals. One is Dr. Brooke, who is a psychologist out of California, works with special operators and et cetera. And the other guest was PJ Miller, former JTF2 operator or Tier 1 Special Operations. And talking with those two individuals, it was something that PJ said, and I've been thinking it for a long, long time. It's just that I don't hear it too often from Canadians because not too many Canadian Tier 1 operators talk in front of a microphone. And what we did agree on, he said it first, and I was so happy to hear it from another dude, and it is this, that we were taught to do anything and believe that we can do anything. Anything. I mean, anything. If someone says, Shaun, you'll never be a psychologist, it's impossible that you could ever become a board certified psychologist. frickin' get out of the way. I'll be a psychologist before 10 years from now. Garen freaking T, $1 million on the table. Nothing will hold me back. Nothing. If I feel it's important. And so I'll be an astronaut in 10 years if I think it's mandatory to save the planet. So that's what it takes sometimes. Sometimes it takes scaling it up to this is so important that I cannot fail. And for the right people, with the right drive, the impossible becomes possible. I've just seen it happen too many times in my life and others' lives. I was enabled to do anything I set my mind to now, but I wouldn't have believed that when I was a kid, when I was 18, skinny, underperforming kid before I joined the military. I didn't think I could rub two sticks together and create fire. But now I realize that you have to see it. You have to be around it. You have to smell it. You have to taste it. You have to touch it. You have to be part of it in order to establish that anything is possible. If you surround yourself with the right people just for a day, you get that vibe and realize, oh my goodness, there's a level here that I didn't understand. That's how it works. And I can apply that in my life, frickin' get out of the way. That's what I love to see for people out there is the individual who wakes up in the morning doesn't think that they can start a t-shirt company, but then later that afternoon they bump into the right person that looks them square in the eye and says, bro, are you even freaking kidding me right now? You're going to smash it. Get to it. Bam. That's what I really do believe we need is messaging that encourages people to believe in themselves more, to understand that they have more in them to give, that they are capable of anything they put their mind to. Maybe not quite as quickly as a tier one operator, but you're capable of more than you think. And I'd love for that messaging to maybe be on the back of a t-shirt. On the back of a t-shirt, could we get some messaging?
Maybe we might be able to sort that out. Dean, you got any thoughts on this?
I'm just going to challenge Shaun, ask if he can be a psychologist in 10 years. That's it. No, I think, yeah, no, we do. Yeah, I do believe it. And I always said that anything is possible. It just hasn't been done yet. But you have to have that motivation. Why do you want to do it? You know, for me, what I've done in the past, I've done it either because I wanted to prove other people wrong. It's probably not the right reason. But that has been my driving force or my motivator. But, yeah, no, Shaun, I've no doubt you'll be an astronaut or a psychologist if you wanted to do it.
Maybe a psychologist, astronaut, both. 10 years. What do you think, Shaun? You're gonna pick this now. Tim, you got any thoughts on what Shaun just said?
Yeah, I think it's great. I think all of us to some reasonable degree. Shaun, Dean. You guys are from the upper tiers of military. Work. We're enablers, right? As a business person, my job is to enable people to achieve their best. And how do you do that? Well, you sit there and you work with them. You give them the tools and the resources so that they can be their best. I find that this is something I learned early in the grunt style side of things and this goes back to the military side as well. Is as a leader, you provide the goals, you provide the resources, and you get out of the way, right? But in that same sense, there is a significant amount of enablement that comes along with that to work with your people, to work with those that feel that they can't achieve what is set in front of them. And you got to give them that nudge, and you got to show them sometimes. You got to roll up your sleeves and be like, "Look, I believe in you so much that I'm going to sit here for however long it is that I think that I need to be at your side to give you what you feel is necessary to achieve that mission." And I think that's important, right? Is especially as you get older and to Dean's points, like once you have that experience and now you have that experience to share with other people, you're enabling. You may not know it, but you might have that conversation with somebody at a grocery store that just was a weird interaction, and you spend 5 minutes talking and you connect on a very small little issue, and that was what that person needed to get over the next obstacle in their life. Like, we are all enablers, and if we're cognizant of that, and we're present in our time, in our space, in the people that we're interacting with, you don't know what you're going to do. I could have enabled somebody to be the next sergeant major of the Marine Corps, right? Because I've had people come up to me since I've been doing this now, over a decade, coming up and say, hey Tim, I joined the Marine Corps because of you. I'm like, what? I am sorry that I put you through that life of pain and punishment. All joking aside, um, that's the nature of the beast. That is what is happening, and I don't take that very lightly. So being present and understanding that you have the ability to enable the people around you, right, in the universe that you're living in. I mean, that's an incredible thing. And imagine what we could do if we were all understanding of that. We can enable some incredible things and change the course of a lot of stuff that we look around and be like, man, I don't understand. Why is the world on fire? Well, is it because we're not engaged anymore and we're not enabling, or is it other things? But I think that we can do more by getting involved and being a part of everything that we're involved in, and just being present.
Absolutely. Shaun, coming back to you on this, what do you think?
Well, I think that I'm kind of in an interesting phase of my life in the sense of what you just described, Tim. And Dean, you'd be able to speak to this better than I, so I'm curious as to what pro tips you've got. So, I was used to, as I've relayed, tier one, I can do anything that I want, blah, blah, blah. But that's an individual journey. That is me heading towards becoming an astronaut, as an example. That's a very focalized for Shaun aspect. But of course, you're kind of doing it for humanity if you're an astronaut, as far as I'm concerned. Why even get in the game if it's just to go stand on the moon? I mean, there's got to be something more to it than that, as far as I'm concerned. Just me. I'd want to do it for a bigger cause than just standing on the moon. And so I think that's the key to the nebulous gray zone that I'm in right now. Is I've been used to doing things for a very small team, like the people that are immediately around me, my people that I can reach out and actually touch three-dimensionally rather than digitally. But now that we're in this digital sphere, and sometimes some of the things that I say have a tiny little bit of influence on someone. In fact, coincidentally, just before I came into this live chat, I was talking with a real good friend of mine, and he said that his girl had heard something that I'd said, and it's kind of shaping some of her trajectory right now. And I didn't think that anything that I got to say in that matter would have been of importance, because they were just not casual statements, but I was just in the zone and just flowing and talking back and forth with her, and it seems to have made an impact, but at a very tiny level, on a one-on-one level. Now that we're in front of microphones, and now that I'm in front of a microphone, I find that not that I'm second guessing myself all the time, but I do apply a little bit of filters to the things that I say. I try to be a little more careful about, dude, I got to stop saying some dumb things. I got to start saying some smart things. And so, Dean, you've been in this game a long time now of, I was going to say influential, but I think you're more of an inspiring character. And you found a way to be inspiring in a righteous and organic manner. And I'm curious as to the pitfalls that you've maybe bumped into that I'd like to edge my way around, so that I don't have to learn those hard lessons, so that I can deliver more effectively for the team.
What do you think?
Yeah, I'd say I'm still a novice as well, Shaun, and I sort of fell into this by accident. So, when I decided I was going to cycle the world's longest road, having never cycled before, and then successfully raised $1.4 million for mental health, broke 2 world records along the way, and things like that. It has to be bigger than you. I went into that. The reason I went into that is so I wasn't smuggling people across borders in war-torn countries. I had to address something personally. And so for me, it was to get myself physically and mentally engaged again. But the project had to be bigger than you. And so, we did it for the world records was for me. That gave me, as you know, from the military, we have to have an objective. We have to have something a target to hit. So that was a target I was hitting. But actually, the money that went to the mental health, amount of people that helped, that waterfall effect, that all just came purely by accident. I was very, very conscious, as you touched on a minute ago, what you say and how you say it and how it can be perceived. People kept coming up to me thinking I was a mental health, a psychologist. I was like, I'm a psychiatrist. I'm not a psychologist. I knew nothing about mental health, but I was always conscious that, what you say can be perceived in a slightly different way. But more for me internally, and it's taken me a few years to get over it. I turned down a lot of TV opportunities before that, and because I respect my SF community. I'm more worried about what 10 people think in my team than 40 million people. And I still have that now. I still have that imposter syndrome now, and I can never get away from that. This new Netflix show will probably change that a little bit, but it's. But a lot of people who I deal with, and even like brand sponsors and stuff, you're organic. You're actually you're unique. You're not selling something. If you say something, we actually generally believe what you say, because you're not on social media every day, preaching and preaching. I know my wife shouts at me all the time. My sponsors shout at me all the time because I'm scared of social media. So for me, it was just all about being genuine and natural, not trying to be something you think the people want to see. And that seems to have worked for me. Yes, I take a little pause when I say things. I have to realize I'm actually not talking to my mates in the back in SBS, and I'm talking to the civilian community. It may be perceived or taken the wrong way, but I think you just have to be natural. I just think everything you do is bigger than you. Anything you do, is for the bigger cause. Because if you do it for selfish reasons or for your own self-promotion, then you're doing it for the wrong reasons, and people can see straight through that. I going again off piece slightly. I was working with a team back in UK who some of the biggest marketing teams in the world. They work with like BMW, Land Rover, and things like that. And the way social media is going now, people are sick and tired of Kardashians holding up some shampoo or whatever. If I look at the telly now, if I see one of the Williams sisters, I just generally don't believe what they're saying, because they're literally selling everything out there. So the world of marketing and social media is changing now. People want to know about stories. They want to know about, what's the story behind that person. And so you're going to see a shift in that. And so that's where I've seen success. In fact, I've just had a story. I do good things, but I do good things for certain reasons. I don't do it for my own self growth, and I'm genuine as well. I put out there. I still uncomfortable even probably doing these podcasts, but over time it gets easier.
Absolutely. Authenticity is a great seller if you can put it out there and keep it there. I mean, like, to be truly authentic it can be challenging sometimes, because the world right now, especially as you said, social media has a has a desire for a certain thing. The algorithm promotes certain things. But I have seen, I think I'm in agreement with you in the fact I've seen a lot more authenticity out there within social media, and I think that's an absolutely great point. Tim, you got any thoughts on this?
Yeah, I think about this a lot, right? Within the business, we have over 400 employees. You bring their families into it; it's somewhere in the realms of 1,200 people, right? And I'm an old salty combat Marine, man. I grew up on the south side of Chicago. I lived all over the country. I've done all sorts of different things, and my life before the military was a little bit, I don't know, criminal. So, like, I know that I can be crass, and I know that I can be, and the words that I say are not popular, right? But I have to be very careful of the things I say, especially when in front of my employees, or when I'm having business meetings, right? Because it can change the course of what people are thinking and how they feel within an environment, right? Because if we're thinking, going back to psychology, right? Everybody operates within the idea of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? And a good employer and a good business person understands that. And what's the first basis of theirs? Like providing food and sustenance, and then safety and security, and then you're going all the way up to self-actualization. I want everybody in my organization to self-actualize, to know that they are the most important person in the world, and the things that they're around them is the most important things to them, and they have the ability to enable and to influence these things when they are able to achieve that. And it's very important. And being authentic is extraordinarily important in today's world, because in the world of social media, that everybody's connected to, well, largely the people are connected to, you can be sniffed out really quickly if you're fake, right? And to be authentic, you have to have a level of transparency and a level of vulnerability. And let's be honest, men like us it's hard for us to be vulnerable, because we're hard-headed. We have a lot of us have big egos, and a lot of us don't want to have that moment of being completely transparent and see-through and vulnerable, because it's just not our style. But to get to where you want to be, for like myself, it took me a lot of psychedelics to get to the point of being truly transparent and okay with me, to go out and then be able to work in the way that I do, and be available for other people. Because I had built a significant amount of armor around myself, because I was not okay with my emotions. I was not okay with some of the things that I was dealing with as a man, and as a person, as a father, as a husband. Right? These were all things that I struggled with for a long period of time. But when I came to the understanding that it's okay, and I understand me, and I'm good with me, and I'm able to have a relationship with myself, then I'm in a position that I can have better relationships with other people, and I can be authentic, and I can be present, and I can be that shoulder to cry on. I can be that shoulder that people are putting their hand on for strength. And I can be all these different things, because I've been able to understand who I am as a person, and what my capabilities are to helping other people. And again, this is not a topic that a lot of people like to talk about, but it's something that I find is important as a leader, is to be that individual that can be transparent, be vulnerable, be tough when needed, lead when it's appropriate, follow when it's appropriate. Because the leaders do follow, and that is a hidden secret that a lot of people don't understand as well. So I think it's important to really understand what authenticity really is, because it's not just being like true to a conversation. It's much more layered than that.
Absolutely. Shaun, what are you thinking?
I'm thinking I agree, and I think that it's as Tim and Dean state, these are not easy things to do. I don't find them easy. I'll say that. And every day, week, month, year, I'm trying to do it better, of course, but it's freaking hard, man. It's hard to put it out there legit, and with no fakery. Not being fakeroni is difficult nowadays, because the um, the the attraction of being validated or liked, or somebody's new best friend, it can be appealing if you're not paying attention. And so I really do focus on that a lot right now, is just trying to be authentic, whatever that means to me today versus a year ago, which I was not as good at it as I am now. And what does good at it mean? Means that I'm more comfortable in the moment. I'm more comfortable in this moment. To Dean's point, we've I think maybe in our last conversation on the collective, perhaps we talked about imposter syndrome. I can't specifically remember, but much like yourself, Dean, I've got wicked imposter syndrome, and maybe I'm saying that with a Chicago accent. I'm not sure, but I do have it, and it's something that I have to constantly keep in check, or more correctly, use appropriately in the moment, and kind of strip it out from time to time, or leave it in place from time to time, to get a sense of if I'm doing things right or not. For me, And then if I'm doing it right for me, if I feel authentic, then it's got to be right for the team. So I'm kind of always feeling my world through two layers, and that is how it feels for Shaun and then how it feels for the team around me. And so uh, either Dean or Tim, um, have you found something that kind of, greases that wheel or makes it a little easier on your melon, that you kind of slipped into this thing a little more expeditiously?
I think, sorry, I didn't mind Tim if I go. For me, I'd gone from a tier one unit where it was a taboo. Social media was a taboo to all of a sudden, this is now a tool to help sell books, get your guest speaking, get your thing. So again, the way it's worked for me being authentic, and I sort of took it from my time in the military. When I was going through the ranks, I saw good instructors, I saw bad instructors. I mean, when I was an instructor myself, I would never ask anything of the students that I couldn't do myself. So it was always through action rather than promotion or shouting at them. So what's worked for me, the attraction of getting genuine, people see me as genuine, is through action and not through me talking about it. What I mean? And that's what's really worked for me, is actually doing it. Again, I don't, if there's a camera off to the side, or this camera's fine, but I don't like doing this. I hate doing stories. That's my biggest imposter syndrome. Again, it just feels unnatural. We just without going into too much detail, just done this big show, as I said, with Netflix. There's three hosts, and one of them's a YouTuber. Probably the least experience out of all is in the military. He did like 4 years in the Rangers, but my God, this guy is good on the camera because he's bored. He's like that. He's used to that. Whereas me and the other guy are like, this doesn't feel right. But we all still look great on there. But going back to yours, what works for me is actually the attraction is through action and not promotion. Me telling people to do it. They see me do it, and then I just share. If they message me, how did you do this? I'll share it.
I like that. Tim, what are you thinking?
Yeah, there's two things, right? I think what is important is your book of work, right? Because talk is cheap, words are cheap, right? And at the end of the day, like I see a lot more people that in Texas they have the saying, "All hat, no cattle," right? And those are the people that just talk out their butt all day, and they don't have anything to show and to support what it is that they're talking about. Your book of work is really all that you have, and that leads into the second point of imposter syndrome, right? I think for one thing to really recognize is that, and I learned this very early, talking to some of the biggest people in McKinsey Group, leaders in business and business development, and what I learned is nobody knows what they're doing. Nobody knows what they're doing. Everybody has their experiences, and that's what's leading them into the situations that they're tackling at any given time. Because you know what, all these situations that we're going through, like right now, Dean, you're sitting in front of a camera. This right here is a new experience, right? Because we're living in the present. And with that, all you have is the experiences that you have behind you of like, I know what I am, I know what I'm capable of, and I know what I can do, and that's all I need to move through this space. So like, and it took me a little bit of a while to understand it, because I suffer from imposter syndrome a lot, like especially as I was flying through the business. I'm like, okay, now I'm a chief operating officer of a $100 million company. I don't know what I'm doing. And everybody I talk to seems like they don't know what they're doing either, like peers at same level business sizes. And they're just kind of going through it. And all these people have peer groups that they go back to, and they call them like, hey, I've got a problem and I don't know how to handle it. And they're leaning on the experiences of others, but those experiences don't really equate to the situation that they find themselves in. So they're taking that information, they're boiling it down to something that they can say, okay, this feels comfortable for me, and this is the direction I'm going to go with that. So, take those ideas of imposter syndrome and just throw them out of your headspace, because at the end of the day, nobody knows what they're doing.
I love that line. I've said that before. I think it's a great way to look at life in terms of um, everybody is doing the best that they can in the moment with what they have, and if they don't have a lot, well, there's probably not a lot of solutions there. If they have a body of experience, then there's probably going to be more solutions there. But I do love that, and I wanted to bring it back to a point that somebody made earlier. I don't remember if it was Tim or Dean here, but being an enabler. And I wanted to get your guys' definition of what it is to be an enabler? Because for people in the military, you hear the word, "Oh, I'm an enabler." Okay, cool, yeah, like I get it. You're, it's a support role. It's whatever. But how do you see being an enabler, especially now outside of the military, to enable those around you? Dean, I'm going to start with you because you look like you're deep in thought.
Yeah, for me as an enabler, again, a similar situation to you, Tim. I was flying back from, me and the family are flying back to UK from LAX on New Year's Eve, and this guy comes up to me and he's like, "You're Dean Stott." And I was like, "Okay." He goes, "I read your book and I've joined the Royal Marines. I'm going back to UK now from New Zealand to just finish." And so, I didn't know I was an enabler. I don't know I'm an enabler. I don't class myself as an enabler. And I think people that say they're an enabler have to have a target audience. I don't know who my target audience is. It varies. And so I think you just have to be authentic. You just have to be you. And if people like what they see, then that's great. But, I wouldn't class myself as an enabler. I just see, people call themselves ambassadors and things like that. Yeah, so I don't. First time I'd really heard that phrase enabler. I've heard ambassador and things like that, but maybe someone peer to look up to. But no, I just think as long as you're authentic, because I wouldn't be an enabler to everyone in society. Not everyone, does what I do or wants to do what I do. And so I just think that whole authenticity, you will end up enabling people just purely through your actions. But I don't definitely promote myself as an enabler. I just give you an example. This is what worked for me. Take the same route if you want, but it wasn't always the right route. I bounced my way along, but these are the lessons I learned along the way, and so that's what I could really do. Is if people want to do what I do, I can't really say, well, for me, it's like what worked and what didn't work. And you guys fill in the gaps.
I like that. Tim, what are you thinking?
I think for some of the things I impress upon people that I work with and those that work underneath me is how do we get to yes, right? Because people are going to come to you and they're going to ask for your assistance. They're going to ask for your knowledge, right? And and for me, it's like I want to give as much as I can to everybody else, right? I'm very open with people and saying, we've built an incredible business here, and I like sharing my toys with people and giving them a hand up in their opportunity. Sharing knowledge as I can into appropriate situations. And really having the sense of mind of saying, you know what, Tim, you've had all this success. You've managed well over $1 billion in revenue that has come through your business, but you are just as normal as any other person that puts their pants on at the beginning of the day. You put it one leg at a time, and you get going, and you do it like everybody else. And it's grounding myself in that understanding of saying, how can I help people with the information that I've learned along the way to be more impactful in their own lives? And it's how do you get to yes? Like if someone's bringing you a problem, and it, and your immediate reaction is, oh, absolutely not, no, that's just dumb, right? And that's the reaction, but if you were to sit back and be like, to give a response is like, I like what you're doing. I don't think I would go about it this way. Here's how I would approach that situation. Now I'm providing you an opportunity, and I'm enabling you to think differently. I'm enabling you to go and think about your problem in a different way. And you might find a different solution that you didn't think of because you were stuck in a brain block and you've worked yourself into a corner. So that's what I think of an enabler is giving people the power, the tools, the ability to think differently.
I really like that too. Shaun, what are you thinking?
So whether I'm an enabler or not, I have no idea. But I will say this, that just within the last 48 hours, an interesting little process has appeared in front of my nose that should make my point. I've been playing around with artificial intelligence art for a while now, Mid-Journey 6.0, just not dabbling, but I mean, if I'm going to do something, I'm going to give it a crack. I'm going to try to, own it. And so I'm not out goofing around on AI art, but I enjoy it, and I find it to be thought provoking, and it strikes my creative spirit. It allows me to do my Miyamoto Musashi with my calligraphy pen, as it were, digital style. And so Mark Ormrod hit me up about not quite 48 hours ago. And he said, dude, I've been checking out your AI art. It's freaking amazing. Would you do one of me? And I said, dude, of course. But the funny thing is, since I started AI art and I started creating, I've got a bit of a ninja theme. I'm a ninja freak. I've got a little bit of a ninja theme going, but I was also creating a little bit of, futuristic, cybernetic, future warrior, etc. And as I was creating all these various characters in AI art, Mark Ormrod was kind of in my head for quite a long time because he's an awesome dude. Plus, he's a freaking hero. Plus, like I was thinking, man, if I can attach like prosthetics or futuristic cybernetic sort of things to a ninja, then I can do that for anything. And Mark, for whatever reason, was in my head. And then he hit me out of the blue and said, hey, would you? And I said, of course. And so I did my best effort the other day and, fired it up on the IG and shot Mark, here you go, pal. That was my best effort. I'll try again in a year to make it better. And so what was interesting to me is trying to be cool with Mark and Mark being cool with me. The enabler in this story is an outside perspective. It's a third party who viewed what was going on between myself and Mark, and they said, hey, you're now a professional artist. And I laughed, like I almost had a bit of snot come out of my nose because I just never really thought of it like that. I just think of it as I'm just goofing around trying to be helpful. But they said, you're a professional artist right now. And so I thought, am I? That's ridiculous. Because if I am, this is now my 10th career. And so I don't think of myself as a professional artist, but the very fact that that individual said it, they enabled me to realize, oh, I could be, I suppose, if I put my mind to it. 10 years from now, I could be an astronaut. So 10 years from now, I could be a professional artist. But it was never, ever, ever a consideration until that individual said it just within the last 24 hours. So they enabled me to open my mind to the fact that I suppose I could if I wanted to. Now, I probably won't because it's the imposter syndrome in me, won't allow me to pursue that. But the fact remains that I don't know if I'm enabling anyone else, but I do know that people are enabling me. So I just wanted to throw that out there.
Now, I'm going to push back on that a little bit because you are absolutely an enabler. You did your entire live chat yesterday enabling people to go do push-ups for a cause, right? And you used a variety of different styles in which to do that. There was some shame, there was some encouragement, there was more shame, there was some more shame. But there was a good variety.
I will say this. I particularly appreciated when I went full Game of Thrones mode and I was doing the shame, 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 shame,
Fantastic.
and calling people out. That was fun. It was fun for me.
So now the reason I wanted to get your guys' thoughts on what an enabler is and that kind of thing is that I recently had I have a hater, and I think it's kind of hilarious because I was always told, growing up, you're never really successful until you have haters. And so when I got the first hater, I was like, yay, I'm successful, that kind of thing. But he asked a question, and I thought it was a perfectly reasonable question. And it was, what makes us capable to speak about the issues that we get into, or the things that we speak about, the stuff that we espouse? What qualifies us as former military or whatever to discuss these things? And what always clicked in my head was, well, I have experience, right? I talk about mental health issues because I dealt with mental health issues. I talked about veterans advocacy because I've dealt with veterans advocacy, that kind of thing. But what I've come to realize now, at least in my mind, is that I'm a facilitator at heart. I like to bring things together so that I like these conversations. I bring people together, we discuss stuff. We come up with either solutions or more questions, but I'm facilitating the whole process. So I'm wondering what your guys' thoughts are on this, and that, you know, what makes us enablers in the sphere of the veteran world or in the shooting world. Like Dean, we have all of these skill sets, but does that just the skill set give us the authority to talk about the stuff that we do, or does the fact that we're willing to talk about the stuff that we do based off of our experience enable us to be listened to, if that makes any sense? So I want to get your guys' thoughts on it. Shaun, I'm going to come to you first, though. What do you think?
Sure. I don't know why anyone listens to me most of the time. Honestly, sometimes my own voice irritates me. So there's that. Second thing is, if I just look back at this week, so today and the last 7 days, I'm talking to two rad dudes. Should they be on the show? Should I be on the show? I don't know. But because we're on the show and we're here doing it for reals, I'm always going to gain something from it, as I hope they gain something from it, as I hope the audience gains something from it. So as I put all my hopes up on a shelf and keep polishing them every week, what I do know is this: it's creating results, because I hear it from feedback. People hit me up after the fact and say, dude, I've never heard anything like that from that guest. That was amazing. That just changed my life. Bam, that's enough for me. On Wednesday, we had a psychologist, and again, PJ Miller, two individuals that came with a ton of experience and not a ton of opinions, but a ton of experience and some carefully chosen language that helped move my needle. So, am I qualified to be in front of a microphone? Probably not. Of course, I've always stated that I never wanted to be in front of a microphone. People dragged me here, kicking and screaming. Like I was punching people out before I even came close to the microphone. They all got it. They all got a little bit of wrath from me because I did not want to do this. So I didn't like skip down the yellow brick road until I bumped into a microphone and thought, yes, finally I've made it. This quite the opposite. This thing tortures me some days. I don't want to be in front of it. Maybe a bit like Dean. I don't know. Tim seems to be more natural, but maybe Tim's got more reps in. I don't know. But I've put in so many reps in front of this microphone now that I'm finally feeling like I'm comfortable in front of it. But it took a freaking long time. So this is what I would say, Chance. I might not be the right guy. I might not be I might not have the authority to speak on any subject, but until someone comes along and takes over my spot, which I have asked for countless times, bring it. Come and replace me. For the love of all things good, please replace me. I'll get back to drinking coffee and riding my mountain bike. So until that happens, I'll just keep on doing what I'm doing. And so for anyone out there who's curious as to, am I competent or capable, or do I have the authority to do this? Maybe not. But if you think you do, bring it.
Bam, like it. Dean, what are you thinking?
Yeah, I think there's a comment we made earlier on in the show. You saw a gap and you filled it. You can wait for someone else to come along, or you can do it yourself, and that's what you guys have done. And I don't think, what's great about this show, I find different from others, is that you bring on guests and they are experts in their own fields, but we're not experts in everything. I go away. I've already gone away from this show learning stuff from Tim, learning stuff from Shaun and yourself, and every show that I've been on. So I'm not here saying I'm the expert, but I will give you what my point of view. My point of view is slightly different. We talked about growing up going to university in America is very different from university in Scotland. That's the great thing about this, is you basically got a collective of individuals who are experts in certain fields, but not in everything. And what we say isn't, don't you don't have to go away and think that's that's the truth. It's just the way that we're expressing our own views from our own experiences. Everyone's unique, and so you're never going to have a podcast where you're going to have an expert, because even the experts, the Joe Rogan, he's always learning. Every show that every guest he has on, he is always learning. So do anyone think they're their expert and know everything? No one knows everything. And so what you've done is just draw a collective of individuals who have their own opinions. And so, yeah, you saw an opportunity, you filled that gap. And then, as you said, you think someone else can do it better, then no one else turned up.
I like it. Tim, what are you thinking?
Well, I am no expert because I fail at more things than I am successful at. But at the end of the day, I'm a professional. And why do I say that? Because I get paid for the things I do. And and until to Sean's point, until somebody can do it better than me, I'm the guy in this business at least, and that gives me some authority to speak on the things that I have experience in, the things that I get paid for. Now, again, if I was to go out there and build myself as some expert in business, well, I would expect to get shot down like a C-47 over the market garden, right? But I don't, because I know better than that, and I'm always learning. And failure is my best friend, because from that I'm able to uh, continue to hone my craft and sharpen my blade.
Absolutely. Sean, what do you got?
Yeah, so just one more thing, because I didn't throw it into my little monologue there. Um, I'm not suggesting that we all suck and there's way better people out there and we're all just waiting for them to step up to the microphone. That's not what I'm saying. We're the right people for the job right now, and maybe forever until another person comes along who's better for the job. So I'm not saying that I suck super bad and please line up the queue of people to replace me. What I'm saying is, if you want the job, come and get it. But until then, I'm going to keep on doing the job, which is in line with what Tim just said. And so we're also not passing out the wisdom as subject matter experts with all the answers. I don't know if we've got any answers, but between the four of us combined, we'll cobble up a few ideas that will help move the needle for someone out there. I know that to be true because I get the feedback on the regular that Tim or Dean or Chance will have said something in this last couple of hours that's changed someone's life. And that's worth it to me. So for anyone who was hating on you, Chance, or had maybe they weren't, it wasn't a hate question, it was just a really challenging question that was along the lines of what gives you the authority. Nobody's got any authority in this podcasting world as far as I'm concerned. It's just humans communicating with each other, and we're all just freaking doing our best.
Absolutely.
As Tim said, nobody knows what they're doing.
That's that's exactly it. It reminds me of a line from Starship Troopers, Sean. Just to bring this right back to what you're talking about, was I think it was Rico that gets promoted, and he goes, "They need a new lieutenant. You're it." And he's like, "Okay, I'll do the job until I get killed, or you find someone better." And just, I think that's such a great concept, and I want to kind of close the show off with that, but I'm going to ask you guys this question. Sean brought this out a couple of episodes ago, and I really liked it since he's did it. So I'm going to ask you guys this question. Over the last 2 hours or so, what major takeaway have you taken from this conversation? What out of the whole thing are you walking away with overall? Tim, you're coming up first. What do you think? Absolutely. Dean, what are you thinking?
Yeah, I think for me, we're our biggest critic. I would talk about the imposter syndrome. I love the phrase "nobody knows what they're doing," and I'll probably learn from that now. Is when I've probably improved now a bit more on social on social media, because you are worried about, and as Chance you've already brought, you're worried about what that guest wrote. We focus on the negatives rather than the positives. You guys know Jack Carr. We were up at Jack Carr's doing his podcast, and he was doing a giveaway. He was doing a giveaway event, and yeah, thousands of great comments and one bad comment. And focus on that one bad one. And so we always focus on the negatives. But for me, it's like that imposter syndrome. How am I going to break through that? And I love what Tim said. Nobody knows what they're doing, and just be a little bit easy on yourself. Don't worry. Don't focus too much what everyone else thinks. They're probably in the same boat.
I love it. Love it. Sean, what are you thinking?
Well, it's not so much any one particular paragraph or sentence or keyword that has stood out for me in this conversation, because there's been several, and I could cherry pick all day long. But I'm going to go with this because this is really what I feel. Um, I I like the vibe, man. I like the vibe over here on today's chat, because hanging out with Dean and Tim, like two eminently capable guys with great experiences, great backgrounds, they're kicking that arse and all of that good stuff. But just throwing all of that to the aside for a second, the vibe, the feel, the feel that I got during this last couple of hours was like hanging out with two really cool guys. And so you can climb all the mountains, you can do all the things, but you can still be a goof. And so I'll respect your big adventures, your grand experiments. I'll always respect someone who's cracking it out of the park. But if you're a cool guy while you're doing it, that really moves the needle for me. So for all of the things that were said or weren't said, you can strip all of that away and get right down to the meat and potatoes of it. And it's got to feel like you're hanging out with cool people. So I just wanted to reiterate to everyone out there that is hanging out and listening to this when it drops, that what you might hear is a bunch of good things. But what I'd challenge you to do is tune into the vibe. And I think that that might be helpful.
I like it. I got to say, my takeaway is it's twofold, but it really is summed up in this one thing. We all have to learn what our capabilities are. Once we learn what our capabilities are, we can build upon that and start finding holes to fill. And then as we do that more and more and more and more, that builds us into the people that we are meant to be. And we can enable those around us to do the same. So that is my whole takeaway. And I really do appreciate the conversation. Dean and Tim and Shaun, this has been absolutely fantastic. I can't thank you enough. So we'll see y'all next week.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
Chimo.
Hey Collective, Big Bird here. Thanks so much for watching the episode. Really appreciate the support. It has been fantastic recording these and having these conversations. I can't thank you enough. If you'd like to watch any other ones, please subscribe to the channel. And if you'd like to listen to another awesome convo, I got one right here. Got one right here. Your choice. Chimo.